Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Slumber Party podcast. I'm Amanda Jewson, and today's a special day because we are joined by the entire Baby's Best Sleep team with Karen and Emma. And I'm so happy that you guys are here because I think that there's some things that you can only really talk about with people who are doing this every day. And what I mean by that is like someone is not going to call me about a problem they don't know is a problem. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm saying
Yes,
that right.
totally.
But one of the biggest, yeah, and one of the biggest things that comes up for us all the time, and I've ranted and raved about this on my Instagram stories, but Instagram stories only last 24 hours. And I want this to live. I want this to live forever. I want to continually link to this episode because I'm so sick of talking about overtiredness and the myth of overtiredness. And I want to, that is what I hope that we discuss today.
It's the
for the love of God.
fear-mongering myth.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start off by sharing how this kind of manifests for me. And then I'd love for you to kind of jump in here. But so we'll be working with a client and, the first few days are always like not great for everybody. Like your nights will come really quick. Your naps will take always longer to get where we want them to be. And then all of a sudden, around day 3 or 4, babies had 3 amazing nights of sleep, so they're more rested. And suddenly, they're not quite, they're really the parent will put them down to sleep, and they either cry a lot suddenly before going down, or their naps become like 25 minutes. And we're like, okay, now's the time. Now's the time. And so I always tell parents when we start our work, okay, for the first few days, let's not worry about wake windows. Let's worry more about following their cues. When they seem tired, let's just put them down. So sometimes that's a really, really short wake window. And then after those 3 or 4 days, parents are like, okay, I had 3 days that are going really well. I don't want to change anything. And then you're like, okay, let's try to bump that up 15 minutes. And they're like, okay, all right. What if they're overtired? Because we have been conditioned to think that overtired is this rampant disease. It happens to everyone. What are you guys hearing in the trenches about overtiredness? How does it manifest with your clients?
Well, for mine, I think that, the concern is, overtiredness is like the worst thing that could happen to their baby. Which is funny because when you start off before those 3 great nights of sleep, their baby's been waking up like so often, and they were actually really overtired and carrying a lot of sleep debt.
Yes.
But I think that, the first 3 days, like we always call them the honeymoon phase, right? So it's amazing to see what's happening during those first 3 days. But then day 4 to day 7 is the regression. And it is important to keep babies up for their full wake window in order for them to build enough sleep pressure. But parents get scared, they get scared. They're really worried. They, oftentimes a really fussy baby is, I guess, hard to deal with. So big question is, well, what am I meant to do during their wake window? How do I keep them awake? How do I keep them stimulated? These are the things I think that, parents really do. Their challenges the first week. And a lot of times I think that parents are so scared of this overtiredness that they are putting their babies and have been putting their babies down before the end of their wake windows and before they are actually tired, which can also create a lot of issues as well.
Yes, totally. I
Emma.
I find too that, I always try to explain to parents that, like you were saying, Karen, that the amount of sleep debt that you came into this with, they're not going to get all of that sleep debt in a matter of a day of us pushing the wake window, and in order to get enough sleep pressure to have a good nap that we want to have, you have to keep them up. And I know sometimes also parents are talking about how they don't know what to do with their baby because they're so fussy. And, I know it sounds funny, but sometimes I say to them, they say if I pick them up, then they start to fall asleep. I'm like, well, then put them down. If you put them down on the ground for a second, they're going to get angry for a second and you can pick them back up again, but it's going to keep them awake for that extra 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And let's be clear, like, we're not in the business of like, hey, when you work with us, your children will be super fussy and angry all the time and you have to put them on the floor. This is not like your real life. This is really temporary.
Totally.
And you also have to be reminded. So there's two things at play here. Both of you guys have said things that make me want to, yeah. So Karen, you said parents will often, well, I find, and maybe this isn't what you meant, but parents will say, oh, I'm anticipating my child will protest for 10 minutes. So I'm putting them down earlier and I'm going to avoid that protest. When in actuality, you could be perpetuating it because if a child isn't tired enough, they will protest. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about the sleep training process. We can kind of transfer our discussion as well to like a baby who does sleep well on their own. But if, yeah, you are putting them down too early, you're going to get into a situation where your child could get a second wind. So they're protesting. Well, now I'm not really tired at all. And I'm chilling in this crib and I'm really angry. And so that's part one. But part two is that because parents are, and I also want to say, like, honor the child in front of you. So if they do seem tired, yeah, okay, fine, put them to bed. If it has been a day or two of that not working, then we have to change it because children can also show tired signs because their body is used to going to bed at a certain time. So if the baby's body is like, oh, we're used to being up for an hour and a half. At this time, I'm going to show all my tired cues. Parents are like, no, but I've read that I have to follow the tired cues. It's like, I know, but like, how is that working for you right now? I don't know that it is working. So just be open to shifting and pushing because children, as they get older, need that additional sleep pressure. And if they don't have it, you're going to get into situation. Well, there's two situations how this manifests for me: either perpetual early days and mornings, or lots of protests at naps.
Yeah, I think that, what you were saying, to read the child on if they do seem really tired, then to put them down is really important. But you also want to read the child on how the nap goes, right? So if you're reading the child and you put them down because they seemed really tired and then they still only had a 20-minute nap or they had a lot of protest at the beginning, then you also need to take that part into account as well for the next time you're putting them down.
Amen.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking too that one of the things that, I mean, we just jump in here and I was thinking before we actually did this podcast episode, it's going to be really important that we explain some of the things that we're talking about because for us, we know exactly what we're talking about. But for sure, there's a mom listening to us right now being like, what? But what I mean is a lot. So if you go onto a baby blog, if you look up baby sleep, if you look up anything, or if you're looking for like a quick tip on the internet, the number one thing in terms of free advice that a consultant or an expert or a doctor is going to give you is avoid your baby being overtired. And that is really good advice. That's really good advice. Nobody wants a super overtired baby. The difference between pushing a wake window of 15 minutes and an overtired baby is pretty different though. And so that's where I think that we should define what overtired is. And Karen, you're so right that on the onset, many of the children that come to us are overtired.
Yeah, no, so that's a really good point. I mean, what is overtired, versus not really overtired? I guess I can give an example. I was working with a mom who had a 6-month-old baby, and she was only giving her baby 2 naps, but her baby actually could really only handle 2.5 hour wake windows. So there was at one point a 4 hour wake window right before bedtime for a 6 month old. And on average, that is way too big. And then, we were looking at things like early morning wakes and night wakings, which, when a baby is overtired, you do tend to see. But let's say, pushing that wake window to 2 hours and 45 minutes or even 3 hours, that would be completely acceptable.
Totally.
Yeah.
And obviously, it always goes back to let's follow your baby. I'm sure there's going to be a 6.5-month-old mom or parent listening right now being like, well, my baby has a 4 hour wake window.
Yeah.
And if it's going well, it's going well.
Right.
But I do think that there are, I have 2 4-month-olds that are responding very differently to different wake windows. So we have to really suss out the wake window for your child. Yeah. So a big issue that I see with overtiredness and fear of pushing a wake window is, it manifests in a couple ways. So we'll work with clients. We work with a lot of 4-month-olds. Would you say what would you say are our highest traffic times? Like
I would say definitely 4 months. You hit that regression and parents are done and they want help at that point. And then some of them, I also get a lot of 6-month-olds, and then I get kind of a big gap.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of like 18-month-olds and 16-month-olds over a year, basically.
Yeah. I've been getting a lot of 9-month-olds lately. So that, and a lot of 8-9-month-olds. Yeah. That kind of age.
Well, I find for me it's 4 and 8 months olds because those are the 2 biggest regression points. So we work with a lot of our clients at the 4-month time. We establish our 2 hour wake window, which is probably the most common. And then at 8 months, that parent is calling me and they're like, I don't know why these naps are so short. They're 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 30 minutes. And then we go through the day, baby's still on 3 naps. Baby still only has a 2 hour wake window. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to need to stretch those wake windows to about 3 hours. Let's start there. And they're like, they'll be overtired. They'll be overtired. And it's that will impede a lot because, the best analogy, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before that I can give, is we all have a metaphorical balloon in our head. Okay. If we want to imagine this balloon, it is empty. It is empty at the beginning of the morning. We open our eyes and we begin to fill the balloon with something called sleep pressure. And so if you imagine that a full balloon, not over full, that's overtired. That's going to pop. But a properly filled balloon is what we're looking for to not only fall asleep, but to sustain the length of a nap or to sustain overnight. So then what happens is we're asking the balloon, if you're watching, I have a wonderful visual here. If you are asking your child, so if this is the potential balloon size, and I'm holding my hand open wide for those of you listening, that's a potential balloon size that we need in order to have an hour nap. And we're asking a child to have an hour nap on this balloon size. I've closed my hand. Then they're only going to get those 20-minute naps. Furthermore, because you're reducing the sleep pressure like this all day, by the time you get to bed, that balloon, again, is still not full. So you are going to see early mornings. A lot of parents start to get into the situation where you have way, way, way early bedtimes. And early bedtimes, we should actually have another episode on this, early bedtimes, because this is another thing that comes up a lot is like early bedtimes being the catch-all for literally every problem. Yes. Early bedtime. It's early bedtime. I'm like, most humans only have anywhere between, I shouldn't say all humans, babies only have between 10 and 12 hours of sleep in them. 100% you will hear about that 13-hour unicorn. Yeah. I mean, unicorn with a diamond
tiara
horn. Yeah. Like that is crazy.
I have one, thankfully.
We don't talk about
just it. Just one out of 3.
It's so frustrating because the irony of this situation is that Emma has like the best sleeping child that gives me FOMO, and I trained that child, and my
That's
own
right.
child doesn't do what her child does. They were both up at 5:30 this morning.
Mine's
I'm not a good
7.
mom.
I was so excited. I'm like, yes. They're usually earlier. They're usually like 6:30. So that was a win.
My kids, right? Well, they're like getting older and they're like, we don't want garbage bags on our windows. So I was like,
Yes.
okay, I'll take them off. And then today I was like, well, I guess they're going back up. And they're like, no. And I'm like, well,
I think so.
we'll see about that. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then we get into the super early mornings. Again, because the child is not building up their balloon to where we can get those longer naps and early morning. Sorry, go ahead, Emma.
I think that too, when we were talking about especially clients, but anybody maybe who did it on their own, who had a baby that wasn't sleeping well, and then they did some sleep work with them, they got them sleeping really well. Fast forward to a few months later, and they're really worried about the overtiredness, but their baby also isn't sleeping. And it's like this fear of the overtiredness is repeating back to what your baby was doing before and really not sleeping well, And if you can remember back to that point, where, maybe you were working with one of us and we were saying, no, you really have to increase that wake window in order to make a difference. You're back in that same position. You have to make changes in order to see a change.
Yeah.
Another thing that just came into my mind when I do speak to clients later on, like let's say we have that one call that happens sometimes. When I go through, the issues that they're currently having, I would say 75% of it is related to wake windows not being large enough, or their schedule is a little bit off, or they're having an extra nap, or releasing that sleep pressure somewhere throughout the day. So this really is like a super important issue, because it really I wish that, hopefully after hearing this podcast, maybe some parents will be like, okay, let's not be scared to extend that wake window. Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's give this a chance and see if it works.
And I also just want to be clear that we're not suggesting like keeping your child up for 6-7 hours at a time. We are maybe talking about anywhere from 15 minutes, sometimes to an hour for older children. It does set people back. And then I felt so compelled to do this episode because the idea of overtiredness is so pervasive. It's not really understood. It keeps being pushed as this fear thing, like, oh, no, you need to pull way back. And it's like, oh my gosh, most of the stuff that we're dealing with is a lack of sleep pressure in our clients. It's a lack of understanding about what sleep pressure is. If you think about it this way, like this is the best way to understand sleep pressure. I'm sure we've all dealt with this. You are 5 minutes from home. Your child falls asleep for literally 5 minutes. And then you're like, it's okay. It's your nap time. We're just going to go. No. You're never having that nap. That nap is gone now. I mean, I shouldn't say that. You're going to have to keep them up for like 30 minutes to an hour. But as soon as we fall asleep, the balloon goes and it's so much of that air is gone, and we're asking our children to fall asleep when the air is gone in their balloon. If I am having a tired day, and lately I have been because my kids are wanting to see more gray hairs during this time. That's what they want. Look, I'm looking in the camera and the bags under my eyes are significant. Anyway, so yeah, if oh shoot, I lost my train of thought now because I'm thinking about how annoyed I am that they were up at 5:30. What was I saying?
We're talking about
so annoyed.
You sleeping, or like giving an example like of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. If I am having a tired day like I am, clearly Later
Good
on in the
example.
afternoon, I will have nothing left. I will go and literally have like a 15 to 20 minute sleep where I try to go to sleep. I'll set an alarm. I wake up. I feel so much better. My sleep pressure has reduced significantly. I'm waking at a light stage of sleep and I feel better. So that's all kind of like, it's all the same thing. And so yeah, I do, Karen, it's such a good point that like the reason why we're doing this episode is not to like shame anyone or like say what you know is wrong, is that there's more nuance to overtired than 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah. I do want to say that, you know, with newborns, you know, they are sensitive to their wake window.
Yeah.
And so if you are listening and you have a newborn, that, you know, pushing them by 15 minutes can make a big difference, because at that point, you know, when they get overtired, they do get quite upset and they're harder to put down and all of those things. And so it's also dependent on the age of your baby on how sensitive they will be to the amount of time that you are increasing their wake window. So the smaller they are, the more sensitive they're going to be to the time.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I do think newborns are a little more sensitive to the overtiredness thing. I mean, and that being said, I know how many newborns have we dealt with where the parents have been like, I've been trying to do anything possible to get this child to sleep for about 4 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
So on that note, on the myth of overtiredness, I hope that we were clear in dispelling that you know, even playing with your child's wake window within an hour is generally safe. They might be fussier going down. You might have some initial protests due to that body clock change, but overall, it shouldn't be a huge indicator of some massive overtiredness. I say, like, what are some examples for you guys? I mean, Karen, you did talk about some overtiredness. A good example that I see of actual overtiredness is typically parents wanting to transition their child from 2 to 1 nap before the child is ready. And that is some overtiredness.
Yeah.
That's moving from, I would rather a child have like a 4.5 hour wake window potentially than have to go to 6 to 7 hours. That's a huge jump. And then parents do it. And then sometimes parents don't have a choice. So I understand that as well with like daycare. But sometimes you do it and then you start to see early mornings and yucky stuff, like lots of behavior stuff. How else is it showing up for you guys?
I just had a client who was 4 months, and mom really wanted her on 3 naps, but she was like a gold star on 4 naps, you know, and she, as we know, nap consolidation doesn't happen until between 4 and 6 months, but this baby would sleep for 90% of the time. She would have a 2-hour nap on her second nap.
Amazing.
Oh my God.
That's incredible.
And so
I want 2 hours.
Right. And so it just, you know, when we were looking at the sleep chart, I was like, she's just sleeping so perfectly on these 4 naps, you know? I mean, this is what she needs. And when we tried to move her down to 3 naps, she had to go down for an earlier bedtime. She was up earlier. And when we're talking about a 4-month-old who's starting their day, you know, at 6 a.m. and you're trying to only give them 3 naps, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It really doesn't work. And then they're fussy all the time.
Yeah.
So it's also, you know, we have to make sure that we're not just looking at the age being like, oh, they need to go down to 3 naps because they're this old. You know, it doesn't, if they're doing well with where they're at, then keep them where they're at.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that.
I just made me think of the 3 to 2 nap transition, because I feel like the overtiredness comment comes up so often when moms are making that transition, because it is a pretty big change going from 3 to 2 naps. And at that point, we are stretching those wake windows a little bit, you know, in the right realm, so to speak. Yeah. But for some reason, that triggers a lot of moms. And that, I feel like that overtiredness, that fear is really prevalent when we're going through that 3 to 2 nap transition.
Totally.
That's a really good point. And I think that you're so right on that 3 to 2 nap transition. It is that And then I also just want to say, while you were saying that, Karen, I was thinking of a client that I was working with, and they were really worried that through the transition, that like the baby was waking at night for another reason. I can't remember. Like, I think it was around the 8 month. This was a few months ago. It was around the 8 month time. So there could have been some night wakings due to just being 8 months. But it'd be like, do you think it's because we pushed the wake window by a half an hour? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, it would be so crazy to see that small, like, significant push impact your night so significantly. So, when you do read overtiredness can create night wakings, we're talking about that baby that skipped an entire nap. We're talking about maybe moving a baby to a nap before they're completely ready. We're talking about that newborn who didn't sleep all day, right? Like
Yeah.
those are
It's
overtired moments for
like
sure.
I tell my clients when they're talking about on the go, right? And we're talking about napping on the go, and some babies nap better on the go than others. And if you're out for the day and your baby doesn't nap at all, and then you put them to bed at night, yes, they may be overtired. And those may be the
Yeah.
nights where you see a little bit more protesting going down, you see a little bit more disruption in the sleep. But, you're at home the next day, and hopefully they can recuperate over the next 24 hours.
I love that. And for all of you who are wondering, okay, like, I really love this advice. Baby's best sleep is amazing. You can head over to my Instagram, because I think the week that this is published, I'm going to be publishing a sleep chart. Go ahead and screenshot it, hold on to it, follow it as your child goes along. And I'm not saying everybody switch their wake windows, but when there are problems, I would start there first, right? Like, this is advice only if there are problems. If you're a baby, like Emma, you were saying, 4 naps,
Yeah.
maybe not what we see in most of our 4-month-olds, but it works for that kid. So then I don't want to do anything different. And it's like, only if, hey, I have a problem. This is my problem. It's not happening. And we're like, push your wake window. And you're like, no. That's tough. That's tough. Okay, so we're heading up to crap nap time, ladies. So
Yeah.
I want to kind of conclude this. The idea being, the myth of overtiredness is only half of a myth, and it's really important that you understand sleep pressure. And my biggest piece of advice, if you are worried about it, ask yourself this: is my child napping period during the day? If the answer is yes, then that balloon is shrinking. So, what we're trying to avoid is a popping balloon. It is very unlikely that your balloon will pop from a little bit more air. So,
Yeah.
if your baby is napping and they're falling asleep, and maybe you skipped a nap, but they went in the car and they slept for 25 minutes, chef's kiss. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we've reduced that pressure. We've reduced the pressure, metaphorically and
Yeah.
literally.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, I feel good about that. I feel like we hit it. Any final
Yeah.
thoughts on overtiredness?
I would just, like I said, and like you said, if your baby is having problems, either falling asleep for their naps, or they're starting to take really short naps, or you're starting to see early morning wakes, don't be afraid to just extend that window. I promise you nothing will happen. In fact, I think that everyone will be better for it. And always remember to give that change a few days, right? I know we want to see always instant results, but when it comes to baby sleep, we have to remind ourselves that our babies are not robots. They're not our alarm clocks. We just need to be patient with both ourselves and with them.
Yeah, perfect. And I think too that we want to remember that, like you said, babies are humans, and they're all different. And so, your baby may have quite a bit of a different wake window than your friend's baby, who is a week difference than your baby. And also to try not to make your decision out of fear, right? Like, give it a try, because the next day, in a few days, you can always bring it back down and it's not going to ruin your baby, right? Like this isn't permanent. You're not giving them a tattoo. Like it's okay. They're going to be okay. And so will you. So don't be so scared about this. This is in parenting, there's so many things that we're scared about and there's so many things we have to worry about. This is one that you can give it a try and move back if it's no good.
I think we have to end the podcast right now because that's the best thing I've ever heard or was said on the podcast. We're not giving your baby a tattoo. Please don't. We're not advocating for that either.
We're not.
On that note, everybody, thank you again for listening to the Slumber Party podcast. If you like what you heard today, go ahead, leave me a review, hit subscribe. It really does make a difference in those lovely podcast providers, pumping my tires to you, getting more tired parents to listen to the podcast. So like, subscribe, please review. That's huge. We have also opened the doors to our community, which is a great monthly opportunity to speak to myself, Emma, and Karen on a daily basis in our Facebook group. You can head over to the episode notes to find out more about that community. And as always, you can find us on Instagram at Baby's Best Sleep. Emma can be found at BBS_Emma. Karen can be found at BBS_Karen N. So it's like Karen, but one extra N. And you can head over to babiesbestsleep.com/blog for more information on all of the lovely things that we discussed today. Thanks so much. Sleep well.